welcome everybody. My name is Patrick Gilbride. I'm the Associate Director here at Reep Green Solutions. I want to thank everybody for coming, as well as our partners at the Region of Waterloo for partnering with us for this webinar today. Yeah, so let me talk a little bit about Reep Green Solutions. Reep Green Solutions, we are an environmental charity that helps people live sustainably. You may well have noticed when you registered for the webinar, and I want to thank some people for making a donation when they did register. Because we are a charity, we do accept donations and offer tax receipts for any donations over $20, I believe. And any donations are most welcome. And so if you see value in the work we do, like the presentations today, we would gladly receive your support if you see value in continuing to see these programs in your community. So we do a lot of, as I mentioned, a lot of things on climate change in terms of reducing greenhouse gas emissions and climate adaptation in terms of adapting to climate change. The most relevant program that we do today is in partnership with the Region of Waterloo. It's called the WET program. And the part of the WET program that we deliver in partnership with the region is the WET home audit. Now, this is a program which you'll hear a little bit more about later on in the presentation. And the goal is to really improve water conservation and preserve our groundwater as a resource for future generations. And what's involved is we have what we call our wet home auditors. They'll go out to people's homes and they look for detecting leaks and other inefficiencies. When they find those, they'll actually, as you can see on the slide, they'll actually install things like water efficient shower heads, aerators, and toilet flappers, which are often the cause of leaks and high water bills. And so the other thing that our wet home auditors will do is to test the hardness of your water, both on your hot and cold water taps, as well as your sort of outdoor water. And our speakers will get into the relevance of that a little bit later. This is something anybody can do at home, and the region offers test strips if you want to do this. But again, it is also sort of encompassed within our wet home audit program. So our first speaker today is Scott Cressman. He's a communications coordinator for the Region of Waterloo. His job is to help people save water and understand the benefits of conservation. Before that, he was a reporter and editor at the New Hamburg Independent newspaper. And he's a proud taker of 3 kids and 2 rain barrels. I think I know what the youngest is going to get for their next birthday. So Brendan Schaefer, he's with Reep Green Solutions. He's one of our wet home auditors who runs the program that I just described. And he's going to talk about water, specifically the different types of water softeners. And he's worked with hundreds of different homeowners and business owners, advising them on ways to reduce their water use as well as their energy use. And finally, we have Steve Gombos, who's homegrown alumni of University of Waterloo and has been manager in the last 20 years as manager of water efficiency with Waterloo Region. And over that time span, he's had a long list of accomplishments and participation in water industry associations and trades, and awards. He actually gave me a list of all of them, but we won't read them out here. Otherwise, we, again, I think we'll be eating into the Q&A if we start going through them all. So we're really excited to have Steve because he's a very knowledgeable speaker. So here's our plan for today. So first off, Scott Cressman's going to talk about the water softener use and impacts of that water softener use within Waterloo region. And then, as I said, Brendan is going to talk about what makes for an efficient water softener or not, as well as some alternatives to water softeners. Some you might have heard of, different technologies. We'll go through those. And then Brendan's going to turn things over to Steve Gombos, to talk about the some of the studies that have been done on some of those different alternatives to salt-based softeners, as well as the new pilot for water softener rebates that the region has recently announced over the summer. So with that, what I'm going to do now is we always like to see, who's attending these webinars. It really helps us to tailor the content and really understand what you want to get out of these webinars. So if you could take a minute to respond to the poll, and then we'll share the results with everybody while Scott gets ready to give his presentation. So I see the results coming in, but we'll give it a couple more seconds. There's still a couple more people. Okay.
Well, folks are quick. That's great.
Yeah. So our number one sort of audience member are homeowners, both with and without water softeners. And then there's a few people who are either plumbers or somewhere in the plumbing industry, and a few others as well. So a real mix, but a majority of people are homeowners. So with that, why don't I turn it over to you, Scott?
Good. Yeah, thank you, Patrick. And welcome, everybody. I'm just going to start sharing my slides here. Okay. Can everybody see that? I guess Patrick's probably the only person who can answer.
Yeah, I see it now. Yeah.
Okay. Good. All right. Well, hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us tonight. Like Patrick said, I'm Scott Cressman, and I work in communications at the Region of Waterloo. And I'm going to just start off tonight by giving you sort of an overview of why people use water softeners and a snapshot of what that looks like here in the region. So, okay. So here in the water from groundwater sources, which means wells. So a consequence of that is that we have some of the hardest water that you'll find in Canada. So when we talk about hard water, that refers to the levels of minerals in the water, mostly calcium and magnesium. And so our water here is considered very hard. Not just hard, but very hard. You'll see there, we've got somewhere between 17 to 36 grains per gallon in our groundwater, depending on where you are in the region. And anything over 7 is considered hard. So we are obviously well over 7. Now, these minerals aren't bad for you. It's, in fact, these are minerals your body need. It's not a problem as far as drinking water goes. But a lot of homes in the region, a lot of homeowners do choose to have a water softener to take those minerals out of their water. So you can see there we have an estimated 142,000 homes in the region with a water softener. That's about 80% of detached or semi-detached homes. All right, so why would somebody use a water softener? The main reason is scale buildup. So you can see in the picture there an example of some scale buildup. And what is scale? Scale is the hard mineral deposits that are left behind from hard water. So yeah, you can get sort of these white minerals sort of caked on, hardened onto faucets, onto maybe the walls of your shower, onto toilets even, things like that. And water heaters are really the biggest risk for scale because scale, the reaction that causes scale happens quicker with hot water. So heated water, like in your water heater, is going to create scale a lot faster than with cold water. So scale in a water heater can clog it up, reduce the efficiency, and really reduce the life expectancy of a water heater. So that's a big concern for some people with hot water, or hard water, I should say. Other people, they just like how softer water feels for showering, or they find their soap lathers differently with soft water and they prefer that. But on the flip side, there are also many people in the region who don't have a water softener at all and are perfectly happy with that. Okay. So what are the impacts of using a water softener? So first, we'll just talk about the water side of it. A water softener at its most basic level, what it does is it's taking the minerals out of the water and replacing them with salt. So these are also called, the technology is sometimes called ion exchange, because you're trading the minerals for the salt ions. And what you end up with in that process is something called discharge water. So this is sort of water used in that process it's salty water that's just flushed down the drain whenever your water softener runs or regenerates. And we estimate that in the region, homes are using up about 1.5 billion liters of water per year for for water softener backwash. Or to put another way, that's about 7% of total water consumption for an average home. Somewhere around $60 over the year, $60 worth of water for an average household. Now, why does this matter? Why are we talking about $60 worth of water? Well, water conservation is something that we work hard on at the region because we have a limited supply of drinking water. There's only so much that we can draw from our groundwater, and as our community keeps growing, we want to make sure that we're preserving that resource, and we're not going to we can stretch it as far as we can as our community grows without having to put a lot of money into, well, building new wells is expensive, or perhaps other even more drastic infrastructure would cost a lot more money. So we want to keep our supply viable for as long as possible. Now, on the salt side, softeners obviously are using salt. Everybody who's dumped a big heavy bag of salt into your softener knows that. So we're looking at about 16,000 tons of salt used here in the region per year. And this water is going down through our wastewater system, and it's going to the wastewater treatment plants run by the region. So this is just like the wastewater that comes from your toilet or your shower or anything else in your house. But our treatment plants, they're not designed to remove salt. That's not what they were made for. And so the salt is not being removed. And when that water is done being treated, it goes back into the Grand River or into connected waterways to the Grand River. So that the salt is affecting our local waterways. And you might hear we talk about salt pollution or chloride pollution. Chloride pollution just means salt pollution. And yeah, why do we care about salt pollution? Well, this isn't something unique to us here in Waterloo region. There are many communities around North America that are seeing increased chloride levels in their rivers, in their lakes, in some cases in their drinking water, and it's an environmental concern. Salt in the water affects plant life and wildlife. We're still studying what that looks like here, but it's something that we want to be careful of. And salt is very hard to remove once it's in water. So it's important for us to be proactive and curtail the salt entering our water before levels get too high. Whenever we talk, and you'll see the last point here, road salt and water softener salt, whenever we talk about salt pollution or chloride pollution, people often think about road salt and all the salt we put on our roads in the winter, which is definitely also a big factor in chloride pollution. But even though that is a big contributor, it doesn't mean we shouldn't look at other sources and other parts of the problem, one of those being water softeners. And I'll just wrap up here with a little plug for our website called watersoftenerfacts.ca. So this is a website the region created in partnership with the city of Guelph. And there you'll find a lot of information about water softeners, some information about how they work, what makes an efficient water softener. There's some studies about alternative salt-free technologies, many of the things that we're talking about tonight. It's a good resource if you want to follow up there on watersoftenerfacts.ca. And also a cool feature, it's got a map where you can look up your neighborhood and see what your water hardness level is for where you live. Okay, and so that's it for me. I'm going to pass it over to Patrick. I think we have another poll question.
Yes, and we do indeed, Scott. So our next poll question is, how would you rate your water softener knowledge? And this is leading into Brendan's presentation on the different types of water softeners and technologies. So I think this will be interesting to see what people's knowledge is going into this. And I know we'll be sending out a survey afterwards as well. So hopefully we'll see how Brendan does in terms of educating people. Okay. So our number one answer is a little bit of knowledge. So a little below average though as well. So the top three are all sort of average or below average. So so I think that gives you some good insight as to where the audience is at, Brendan. And it's probably a good segue for you to talk about your part of the presentation.
Yeah, thanks, Patrick. Yeah, so as Patrick said, I'm going to talk a little bit about how water softeners work and what to look for in an efficient water softener and that sort of thing. So just in general, this is sort of a diagram of a water softener. And if you have one, this will look familiar to you. But basically, we've got two things, a brine tank here, where you dump the salt into as a homeowner. That's where you put your salt in. And then there's another tank that is the tank that does the actual softening. Now, sometimes that tank might be inside of the same bin that the salt is in, but oftentimes it's separate and sits beside it. Either way, you've got two separate places, two separate parts of your softener. And then there's the head of the softener at the top of the mineral tank. So what happens with this is, as Scott alluded to a little bit before, you put the water in the brine tank here. You put the salt in the brine tank as the homeowner, and then the softener runs water into that salt and creates a salt solution that it then pumps over to the mineral tank. The mineral tank has some resin beads in it that when soaked in its salt solution, It creates a chemical reaction that pulls the calcium or the hardness out of the water, and it sticks to those beads in the tank here. And as soon as the softener has reached its capacity to absorb that hardness, as soon as the resin beads have absorbed all that they can, the softener will then need to regenerate, which it does by flushing out all of the rinsing and flushing out the hardness that's in the resin beads, and that basically flushes out and goes down the drain. And then it recharges those resin beads by pumping more another batch of salt solution in to recharge so that it can soften water again. So that's kind of the basics of how it's working. You'll notice that if you have a softener, you may hear it making a lot of noise from time to time. That's the only time that it really makes any noise or does anything that would make noise is when it's regenerating and flushing out that old solution and regenerating it. So there are basically three sort of types of softeners, and this is what you're seeing here is three examples of the head of the softener, what's on top of that mineral tank. And this one on the far left here is a timer-based softener, and don't see a lot of these nowadays. They're sort of an older type, but basically the way this one works is it just has a timer which is set to regenerate only after a certain number of days, or sometimes it's set for every day. Sometimes it would be every few days, depending on how the settings are set. But that tends to be the least efficient way, because even if you don't use a lot of water, maybe you go away on a trip or a lot of the family or the household goes away, you're not using as much water, it's still going to regenerate just as often, even though it's not having to, it might not be the solution might not be saturated yet. It's just that's when the timer goes off, so that's when it regenerates. So it tends to regenerate more often than it needs to that way. The next one in the middle is a mechanical demand regeneration type. And this is a little bit more sophisticated. It's still a mechanical mechanism that does this. It doesn't have any electronics in it per se. But what it does is it measures the amount of water. The difference between this and the timer-based one is that this one actually measures the amount of water that is going through the softener. And that way it knows when it needs to regenerate a little bit better. So it knows that it's used up, or it's almost used up all of the salt solution that it's created. So it needs to regenerate. And that is helpful because, in a case where you're not there for a week, or if you go on vacation, it's not going to keep regenerating and regenerating even though you're not there. It knows, because there's no water going through it, that it can wait until a certain amount of time when that solution is completely spent before it regenerates. That means it uses a lot less water and a lot less salt because it doesn't regenerate more often than it needs to. The third one over on the right is a sort of a digital demand regeneration. And has a digital display, you'll see here. It's kind of a generalization. There are more efficient and less efficient softeners that have this kind of digital display, but in general, it tends to be just have more sophisticated circuitry and intelligence that allows it to be a little bit smarter about how often it regenerates. And so this is tends to be the most efficient type of softener that you can find. Although there are some softeners that don't look like this that are also very efficient. So there is some variation here, but this is sort of as a generalization. So just some typical softener problems. The biggest problem in terms of water use and water wastage, the biggest problem is if a softener is leaking. If there's a problem with it that causes it to drain all the time. It's only supposed to drain and pump out water when it's regenerating, but sometimes if the valves go out, certain things can happen to it that make it just have a constant leak. And even if it's only a small trickle of a leak, it can really add up to a lot of water use that can really run up your water bill. So that's something to make sure that there's no water. Oftentimes you can see the drain hose coming from your softener. It may be going into your laundry sink or into a drain in the floor. It's a hose usually, and you can just look at it and see, is it draining? Is it draining right now? And it's not, it's not the time when it should be regenerating. It's one thing that would definitely can really add up to higher water use with a softener. But sometimes the softener can also regenerate too often. It may be, for a number of reasons, it may be regenerating more often than it really needs to. And that can really add up to water softener. You can imagine that a water softener might use anywhere from 100 to 500 liters of water when it regenerates. So if it's regenerating every night rather than once a week, for instance, or once every 2 weeks, that's going to be a whole lot more water and salt that it's using. So that's something, and that can often be if the settings are not set properly, or if they're set just too aggressively, and it can be using, just regenerating more often than it needs to. And the other thing that can actually make a difference with your softener is if it's softening both the hot and the cold water. And sometimes even the outside water, the outside water that goes to your hoses, and that you really don't want to have softened because it's not good for your garden, for your plants and things, softened water, because it has that sodium content in it. But also just changing your softener so that it softens only the hot water rather than the hot and the cold. And I think we're going to talk, a little later, we're going to talk a little bit more about that issue. But basically, you don't necessarily need all of your water to be softened. A lot of homes do only have the hot water softened, and I live in a home where it's only the hot water that's softened, and it works out pretty well. There are just a few things you have to be aware of with that. There are a number of alternative types of water conditioners. We need to be careful about what we're calling them because they're not really softeners. There's a difference between a softener. If it's a salt-free conditioner, it doesn't actually soften the water, but rather so in other words, it doesn't take the hardness, the calcium out of the water. What it does is it changes the chemical makeup of water so that the hardness doesn't build up it doesn't stick to the pipes or your water heater, and it doesn't build up. So basically, it's just keeping the hardness from reacting to your fixtures in essence, and then the pipes. It keeps those hardness molecules suspended. There are a number of other they certainly do use less salt. They use the one that there are a number of different ones. There are some that use magnets or radio waves, different things like that. The one that we're most familiar with that does work, evidently, seems to work pretty well, is called that NAC, or nucleation assisted crystallization. It's sometimes also called TAC, or template assisted crystallization, although that's a sort of a copyrighted name now, I believe, so it's not used as much. But that is one type that uses no salt, and there are a number of others that use no salt as well. But just to note that those don't necessarily do the same thing as a softener. So you're going to have some differences in the water that when you're taking a shower. Some people really feel like they can tell when the water is not soft. They like that soft water for showering and whatever. You're still, with this type of a system, you're not going to get that soft water feel because it's not really soft water. It's just keeping that hardness from damaging your pipes and your water heater. So I'll go ahead and pass over to Steve now to talk about some of the other issues here.
Thank you, Brendan. As was mentioned, my name is Steve Gombos. I'm with the Region of Waterloo in the Water Efficiency Group. And next slide, please. So we've been asked to look at water softeners for quite some time. I found an old flyer that educated the public about water softeners back in the 1980s, and people are always asking questions. They want to know about it. So it kept coming to me when I joined the Water Services Group in 2000, and over the years, we tried to educate ourselves about water softeners, and we did some performance testing in partnership with the City of Guelph from 2009 to 2012. And And then, as was mentioned, we have our website where we post the results of what we learned. We're striving to encourage agencies like Water Quality Association and NSF and other international standards associations to raise the bar for performance of water softeners so that they become as efficient as possible. And then we're looking at some viable alternatives that will help us to cut down on the amount of salt and water being used in the region of water softeners. Next slide, please. So as Brendan said, there's one, and we're not saying that there aren't other good alternative technologies out there, but this one, this nucleation-assisted crystallization, has looked promising. So we did some testing at our research facility in the city of Waterloo, and we looked at it. And so this technology, it looks like a cylinder, and the water flows through a media. They're little beads, similar, but much smaller than the beads you would find in a ion exchange water softener that you put salt in. And these beads are proprietary type technology. There are 3 manufacturers of it. And the beads basically attract calcium and magnesium ions onto these nucleation sites. So the calcium and magnesium, they're like nanoparticles, collect in these sites, and then when they reach a critical mass, they break free and they stay suspended in the water. So they won't stick to your plumbing and to your appliances. So we thought this would be a good one to take a closer look at. Next slide. So first, as I say, we did our testing in Waterloo, and we found that it looked like it was working. We tried some different tests. It was difficult for us, but we did estimate that the media inside those units would last about 4 years. And the manufacturers of the units say the media lasts anywhere from 3 to 5 years. So probably depends on the composition of your water and how much water you put through it for your household. But it looked like it would work for a number of years. So the next step we thought was, well, let's try it out in the field. Let's ask homeowners, particularly people that have water softeners now and are happy with them, but they're open to trying a new technology. So we did a survey, and we asked people if they'd be interested in participating in a home study for a year on the technology. And we narrowed the list down of people, and we did focus groups. And from that, we selected 18 households split between the city of Guelph and the region of Waterloo to test these NAC units for a year. And we launched that test in January of 2019, and then we wrapped it up by the end of the year. And here we are reporting the results. Next slide. So of the 18 homes, we said to them, okay, trade your softener for this TAC unit and try it. And then if you want, you can keep it at the end of the test, or give it back to us and, put your old softener back in place. And of the 18 homes that tried the unit, 13 of them chose to keep their TAC units. They said despite some of the things that maybe weren't as nice for them as using a water softener, they found ways to overcome those barriers. They felt proud about helping the environment by cutting down their salt and water use. They appreciated the convenience of not using salt, and so on. So next slide. So in summary, I've already mentioned the benefits of the technology reported to us by these people were that they didn't have to carry salt. They're saving money on salt and water use. Some of these water softeners do use a bit of electricity, and so there was a savings there, reducing their environmental impact. A big one was they liked the fact that they could turn on any tap in the home and be able to drink the water. With water softening, of course, the calcium magnesium ions, the hardness ions, are traded for salt in your water softener, and so all your water becomes salty. And especially people on special diets, they can't, they shouldn't really ingest as much salt. So That was a factor for some people. Again, the environmental impact. And then in the early days, the technology actually helps remove some of the calcium buildup out of the pipes. And so could be a helping to the plumbing system that way. Next slide. So on the negative side, and this was quite common, where people were saying they got spotty dishes in their dishwasher. And in some cases a film, you know, a little bit more cleaning, because again, this is, there is some calcium carbonate buildup on your plumbing, but it's easy to wipe off, they say. It's more of a powdery film as opposed to the hard scaling that happens when you have no treatment at all. And what a lot of people found was they used vinegar for cleaning, and it worked great. And even put like a cup of vinegar in the dishwasher for every load, keeps the dishwasher clean, and the dishes come out without any spots. The downside, though, is that there's no indication when the system is working. Like, it's hard to tell when the unit's working or not. So that was a drawback. And then, of course, years down the road, you know, you're not sure exactly when the media needs to be replaced. So the technology that they're selling doesn't have any like light that comes on or any way to know. So you have to basically mark it on your calendar that in 3 to 5 years, you have to replace the media. Some people were concerned that it might hurt the resale of their home because it's not a mainstream technology, and others who are buying the home might be not as enthused about having that technology in their home. Next slide. At the end of our study, what we did was we asked the people, we said, okay, how likely would you be to recommending this technology to a friend, a neighbor, a family member? And that gives you what we call a net promoter score. So what you do is the people that say, well, I don't know, or maybe, or whatever, those are the passives. We knock those out. And then we just compare the ones that said no, the detractors, from the ones that said, yes, I'll promote it. And as you can see by this chart, 47% of the people said no, they wouldn't recommend it. And so that's a weak. So your net promoter score for that is minus 18, because you're 18% higher, fewer promoters than you have detractors. So that's not a great result. Next slide. So we said, well, you know, there's still promise there, but it's not for everybody. We're not sure it's going to be a wide scale opportunity or not at this point. It's, you know, the early adopters will try it, and then the market will sort itself out. In the meantime, we're suggesting we'll consider not softening water at all. That's kind of a policy sort of hierarchy for us. And then the next step would be to try a salt-free alternative, which we mentioned. But ultimately, maybe you want to try softening your hot water only. Like, we think that we can really make a big impact in the community, and people still don't have to throw away the softeners or whatever. In fact, if you soften hot water only, you're going to extend the lifespan of your water softener. Next slide. So we looked at that. We said, so an average household of 3 in Waterloo region, being pretty water efficient, about 65% of their household water use is on the cold water side. So if you're softening only the hot water, then you're going to reduce your salt and water consumption by approximately 65%. So that's pretty good. The annual water bill savings on that is $39. Your cost savings for an average 3-person home, $45 for salt. So for a conservative estimate is that in the city of Kitchener, a 3-person household will save about $84 per year on operating costs on regular water softener. That's saving 8,800 liters of water and saving 108 kilograms of salt per household per year. So this is every year you save this. And then because you're using less salt and water, which takes a certain amount of greenhouse gases to provide to you through the taps or to mine and extract the salt and process it and deliver it to market, you're saving another 48 kilograms per year of greenhouse gas equivalent. Next slide. So we said, well, let's try a pilot. Let's offer a $50 rebate to anyone who is softening water throughout their household and wants to make the conversion in the plumbing to soften just hot water. And by the way, in most businesses, in high-rise apartments and places like that, they don't soften the cold water. They only soften the hot water, if they soften it all, because the business case isn't there for softening cold water. Calcium builds up slower, and it's easier to clean on the cold water side. And then with hot water, you're still protecting your water heater and your other appliances and plumbing. So our goal over the next 3.5 years, we launched this program this summer, right in the thick of COVID. And I want to thank Reep Green Solutions for helping us with this program and with the wet audit program. They've come back doing water audits for us in July. And, they provide a fantastic service for the region and for homeowners. So I wanted to make sure I thank Reep for that, and also for hosting this workshop. It's a great way for us to advance our program. Anyway, so our goal is to convert 1,200 households by the end of 2023, save 10,000 meters cubed of backwash water. A cubic meter of water is 1,000 liters. So on your water bill, when you're looking at your water bills, it's quoted in cubic meters. So that's how you know how many liters you would be using if you multiply by 1,000. Save approximately 126 tons of salt per year and reduce greenhouse gases by 56 tons per year. So that's our objective. Next slide. And so people say, well, how much is it going to cost me to change my plumbing? We've gotten about, I think, approximately six rebates now issued. So the program is still very young. And of those, there's quite a broad range of costs associated with converting. But somewhere in the middle, $200-300 for a conversion is what we're seeing the prices coming in at right now. But those numbers will change over time. But if we give you a $50 rebate to convert your household to softening hot only, and it costs you $200 to pay for a plumber, or if you do it yourself, then your payback is in 2 years. So after 2 years, you're actually making money on the conversion. As well, you're going to potentially double the life expectancy of your water softener. So we didn't even add that into the calculation that your softener is going to last a lot longer. Next slide. So basically what we're asking people to do is register for the rebate program. We send you hardness test strips to your house, and you can check your hardness to see if you're softening hot water only, hot water and cold water together, or some other combination. If you are softening basically almost all the water in your house, then you qualify for the rebate. And then once you get the work done, you send us a receipt and proof that you did the work, and then you will get your rebate. Next slide. So you can register online for the program through regionofwaterloo.ca/conservation and test the water hardness yourself, as I have mentioned, or you can book an audit through Reep Green Solutions, and they'll come and do the whole home audit. They'll check your water to see if it's hard or soft and so on. And then from there, you get your installation done and submit your receipts. Next slide. So some interesting results. So far, approximately 203 people have sent us back results from doing their test strips at various taps around the house. The garden tap, the kitchen sink, the bathroom. And what we found is that 22% of households are not only softening all the water in their house, they're softening the water that goes to the outdoor tap. So that's quite high. And as was mentioned, we don't, it's not good for your plants to be irrigating with soft water because you're spraying salt on them. And of course, it costs you money too. 54% of the households are softening both hot and cold at the kitchen sink. So I would imagine a fair number of people in those households are drinking softened water straight out of the tap. And then a smaller percentage of households are softening cold water, but not hot water, particularly in the bathroom. So these are the types of early results that have really opened our eyes already as to what the different situations there are out there in the residential sector. Next slide. So that concludes the presentation portion, and I'll leave it to Patrick to referee the question and answer.
Yeah, thanks very much, Steve. That was great. So before we dive into the Q&A, we have one last interactive polling question, which I will send to people. So based on what you've heard or other information or research you've done, would you consider switching to hot water softening only? And we'll just give results are coming in. We'll just give people a few more seconds to answer the poll. All right, it seems to be leveling off. So it looks like I'm not sure how you characterize that net promoter thing, but the majority of people would certainly consider it, and there's some maybes there as well. And then 2 people who said that they would not consider it. And just a reminder, if you do have questions, please put them into the chat. And there are quite a number of people who have already been doing that. And with that in mind, we'll try and get to as many questions as we can before the hour is out. So I might try and consolidate some of these questions. Steve, there's a couple different questions asking specifically about the effect of cold water on pipes or appliances and whether that's a concern. And if you had thoughts about that.
Well, the chemistry behind the calcification process, it goes so much slower on the cold water side that it's not as big of a problem, and there's no evidence to suggest that there's any economic benefit to softening the cold water side, either in like I know some people talk about clothes washers, and we've been kind of encouraged, especially by the energy sector, to conserve energy by washing with cold water only, and that's great because you're not heating the water to put through there. But I personally do not soften the water in the house, and we've got a washing machine that's been working for years and works well. The key there is to put the proper kinds of soap in, like the high efficiency. If you have a front loader, if you have to put the high efficiency soap in there to maintain the lubrication for the drum. There are some products that will help you to clean out the clothes washer. But as I say, I don't think that there's any evidence to suggest that the longevity of your clothes washer will be shortened if you soften only the hot and not the cold. And maybe that's a future study someone needs to do, but yeah, it's really the focus is on the hot water heater. The studies have shown that you lose a certain percentage of your energy efficiency with the calcium carbonate buildup on there. One of the downsides to softening water is actually that it can actually be a little bit corrosive to your copper piping. And so in facilities like nursing homes and things like that, you can, they use such a high volume of water and they're softening it on the hot water side, not the cold, just the hot. And they'll get pinhole leaks in the plumbing because of the slight corrosiveness of softened water. So that's an actual downside of softening that you don't get if you had hard water. So your plumbing won't leak as easy.
And just further to that, I would just say that it's important to note also that the dishwasher is usually hooked up just to the hot water, so that one wouldn't be affected by the change in the softening of just the hot water.
Thank you both. So there's another question here, which you touched on, Steve, about potentially extending the life of your softener. But there's a more general question. Is there any, and I'll throw this one to Brendan, is there any maintenance tips you have to prolong the life of a water softener?
Yeah, I mean, aside from what Steve said, it certainly to change it over to only hot is going to help extend the life of your softener quite a bit. I guess making sure that you're keeping up with the salt, that your softener does have salt. If your softener doesn't have salt in it, sometimes it can actually try to regenerate much more, thinking that the water's not soft. It will just keep trying to regenerate, and it doesn't work. So just make sure that you do, and also you probably don't want to add too much salt all at once. You don't want to fill up the brine tank. You want to just maybe put a few bags in at once, 1 or 2 bags in at once. It can get compacted. Oftentimes the salt will get compacted and not, and again, it acts as if it doesn't have any salt then, because it can't access the salt. So those are a few things that certainly do make a difference.
Great, thanks. There's another question, basic question here, which I'm sure other people are wondering about too, is so how do you know if you're softening hot and cold water versus just softening hot water?
I can answer that one. It's the test strips. So we have these little test strips. All you do is fill a glass of water with water, and then you just dunk a test strip in, and depending on the color it turns, it only takes like a couple seconds, and you'll know by the color whether the water's soft or hard. And so that's the first step in the process is, you contact us, you register, we'll send you the test strips, and you can go around the house and check. And it's a cool little science project for your kids if you want to bring them along and show them how it works. It's pretty neat. And then, so on the package that we send the strips to you with, it's color coded, so you can get an idea of the hardness of your water. Now, we've talked about grains per gallon, and I forgot to mention that earlier, is that the reason we talk in US measures is because all the water softeners and all the sort of supplies that you get for home water treatment are usually in US gallons and in US measures. So, in Canada, we usually talk in metric, so we would be talking about either milligrams per liter of hardness or parts per million. But when you talk about hardness in the metric terms to softener dealers, they quickly switch you over. So even calculating the size of softener you need, they usually talk in gallons and not in milligrams per liter. So if you were talking, for example, parts per million, at 36 grains per gallon in Waterloo at the 1 William Street pumping station, that's over 600 parts per million of hardness in the water. So that's good to keep in mind as well.
Yeah, and I'll just add that in terms of how you know if your water is hard or soft, which is hard and which is soft, you can also as we mentioned, have a water audit done, and you get the benefit of also having your water usage analyzed to see if you're, if there's any other ways that you're wasting or that you could reduce your overall water usage. So that's another option as well.
Great, thanks. Sort of a related question. Somebody's wondering about new building construction and whether they would, when those new homes go in, there's anything in the building code that they're only softening cold water, or is there any indication on the age of the home whether there would be a difference there?
That's a really good question. We're working on draft building standards for new developments that will also address the plumbing for water softening. It's really a mixed bag. There's nothing in the building code that outlines, how it should be plumbed in for water softening. And so that's something we do want to promote, because it's a mixed bag. Like depending on who's doing the plumbing and who's doing the modifications. Like a lot of times you have do-it-yourselfers that will, make the rec room and finish the basement, and then they might not always be doing plumbing according to the plumbing code or whatever, and then they drywall, they put drywall up and cover pipes. So I know it can be tricky, but in new homes, yeah, we would really like to see that plumbed properly off the get-go. And we would like to, we're going to be going forward to council with a build standard that we're hoping will be incorporated into local building in the next year or two.
Great, thank you. There's a number of questions specifically around the hardness of the water locally, and whether that's really a regional phenomena or extends beyond that. Some people are wondering about water drawn from the Great Lakes.
Yeah, I can answer that as well. Well, the Region of Waterloo draws most of its drinking water from underground wells, but we're landlocked. We're right smack dab, and we're surrounded by Great Lakes, but they're not that close. And one of the things we're trying to do with our water conservation is prevent the need for a pipeline from Lake Erie for our drinking water. So we get some, we get about 20 to 25% of our water from the Grand River, the Mannheim water treatment plant. So that water, like surface water, rivers and lakes, are typically softer, and you should not need to soften at all. And despite that, in the city of Toronto, there's still quite a few households that use water softeners when they don't really need to. Like 7 grams per gallon is considered an ideal water hardness. And I know when I had a cottage on Lake Huron, the water coming in from Lake Huron was bang on 7 grams per gallon hardness, and it was nice. It felt a little bit soft, but you could wash the soap off. You didn't get that soap film, which some people think is really cool and smooth, and other people don't like it as much. You have to have a longer shower to rinse the soap off or whatever. But yeah, it varies across Canada. And there are pockets like Calgary's got harder water, so you see more water softeners used there. But a lot of smaller rural communities that rely on wells for the water will have hard water and might want to treat. Now in those cases too, there's other things that could be in there. There could be iron in the water and other water quality issues. So every community is different when it comes to water softening and water treatment. We can't really just make a blanket statement.
Great. So we're running out of time here, but there's a couple more general questions if you'll indulge me to get these in under the wire, because I think they're worth asking. So there's a question, maybe I'll let Brendan have the first crack at this, in terms of best practices around tankless hot water heaters and how that interacts with water softeners. Did you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, well, definitely it's more of an issue. Hard water is more of an issue with tankless water heaters. So if you if you have a tankless water heater, you definitely want to make sure that you have a good softener that's softening the water very well for that. It tends to be just a much quicker buildup in tankless water heaters. So if your water is hard, there's certainly a lot more maintenance. Generally, with a tankless water heater, you want to have it flushed out once a year. But if your water is soft, you're probably not going to need to have it done quite every year. But it really is important to make sure that you have that if you have a a tankless water heater. I will mention that I've recommended tankless water heaters a number of times during energy audits at different times, and have come back to find that the plumber suggested to the person that they not get a tankless water heater because our water is too hard in Waterloo region. It really doesn't make. I'm not sure why they say that. It really doesn't make sense. If you have a water softener, the water that's going to your hot water tank is not hard, so you don't have to. And a lot of people have them in Waterloo region. So it's just a matter of making sure that you are that your softener is working properly.
Great. So unfortunately, we're out of time. There's still lots of questions there. So if people have specific questions, I'd encourage you to go to the region's website. As they said, their water efficiency website has a lot of information there, as well as a way to fill out and get more information. Certainly, you can contact us at info@reepgreen.ca. And we can direct any of your questions accordingly. But yeah, I just wanted to thank Steve, Brendan, and Scott for their presentations today, and everybody for sticking around. I think it was a great discussion, and as I said, there's the conversations continuing in the chat. So I think we could keep going if we really wanted, but I think we'll leave it there for now. And pick it up another day, perhaps. So thanks again, and we will be making the recording of this webinar available in case you want to watch it again or share it with anybody who wasn't able to make it. So thanks everybody, and we'll see you later.